I was appalled, like you, at the violence and destruction that we saw that day. I was appalled that you, our country's elected leaders, were victimized right here in these very halls. That attack, that siege, was criminal behavior, plain and simple, and it's behavior that we, the FBI, view as domestic terrorism. It's got no place in our democracy, and tolerating it would make a mockery of our nation's rule of law. The rule of law, of course, is our country's bedrock, and it's our guiding principle at the FBI. That's why the FBI has been working day and night across the country to track down those responsible for the events of January 6th and to hold them accountable. We're chasing down leads, we're reviewing evidence, combing through digital media to identify, investigate, and arrest anyone who broke the law that day. And our greatest partner in this investigation has been the American people themselves, your constituents. Citizens from around the country have sent us more than 270,000 digital media tips. Some have even taken the painful step of turning in their friends or their family members. But with their help, we've identified hundreds of suspects and opened hundreds of investigations in all but one of our 56 field offices. And of those identified, we've arrested already more than 270 individuals to date, over 300 when you include the ones of our partners, with more subjects being identified and charged just about every single day. The FBI is committed to seeing this through, no matter how many people it takes or how long or the resources we need to get it done, because as citizens, in a sense, we're all victims of the January 6th assault, and the American people deserve nothing less. Unfortunately, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, January 6th was not an isolated event. The problem of domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country for a long time now, and it's not going away anytime soon. At the FBI, we've been sounding the alarm on it for a number of years now. I've been sounding the alarm about domestic terrorism since, I think, just about my first month on the job when I first started appearing up on the Hill. And I've spoken about it in maybe a dozen different congressional hearings. So whenever we've had the chance, we've tried to emphasize that this is a top concern and remains so for the FBI. In fact, we viewed it as such a critical threat that back in June of 2019, under my leadership, we elevated racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism to our highest threat priority, on the same level with ISIS and homegrown violent extremists, where it remains to this day. Now, I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of ground today, but let me make one thing clear. The FBI will not tolerate agitators and extremists who plan or commit violence, period. And that goes for a violent extremist of any stripe. As I've said many times, we do not investigate ideology, but we focus on acts of violence and violations of federal law. And when we see those, we will bring to bear the full weight of our resources, our experience, and our partnerships.
So it comes down to the basic question of what the FBI knew, when they knew it, whether they shared it, why this didn't rise to the level of a threat assessment.
So, Mr. Chairman, I welcome the question. You touched on a number of points there. So first, let me say that we were, in the period leading up to January 6th, tracking a large amount of information about large numbers of people coming to participate in protests and about the potential for violence. The one specific piece of information that you referred to, the information from our Norfolk field office, has gotten a lot of attention. So this was a what's called a situational information report. It was prepared by our Norfolk field office specifically for dissemination. It was, as you noted, raw, unverified, uncorroborated information that had been posted online. And my understanding was that that information was quickly, as in within an hour, disseminated and communicated with our partners, including the U.S. Capitol Police, including Metro PD, in not one, not two, but three different ways.
When, can you be more specific on time?
Three different ways. So first, there was an email, as you said, to our Joint Terrorism Task Force, which includes, the Joint Terrorism Task Force includes task force officers specifically selected by their chiefs who participate on the Joint Terrorism Task Forces for the very reason to be that chief's, that department's eyes and ears so that they get the information real time, their departments do. So that's the first piece. Second, in addition to the email, verbally, through the command post briefing that we had, because we had stood up command posts both in the Washington field office and at headquarters, and those command posts included, again, representatives of the relevant agencies, Capitol Police, MPD, et cetera. Verbally, the same information was walked through again. And third, in addition to the email, in addition to the verbal briefing at the command post, the information was posted on what we call LEAP, which is a law enforcement portal, which is made available to law enforcement, not just here in the National Capital Region, but all around the country. Now, again, the information was raw. It was unverified. In a perfect world, we would have taken longer to be able to figure out whether it was reliable, but we made the judgment, our folks made the judgment, to get that information to the relevant people as quickly as possible, like I said, 3 different ways in order to leave as little as possible to chance. Now, I didn't see the report myself even until after the 6th. But the way in which it handled, at least as I understand it, strikes me as consistent with our normal process.
The next big lie appears to be the argument that somehow or another those were not Trump supporters who invaded the Capitol. It made the rounds on the internet right before they came into the building and has been gaining momentum ever since. I'd like to ask you, Director Wray, do you agree that the Capitol attack involved white supremacists and other violent extremists?
Certainly, the Capitol attack involved violent extremists. As I said, we, the FBI, consider this a form of domestic terrorism. It included a variety of backgrounds. Certainly, there were quite a number. We're seeing quite a number as we're building out the cases on the individuals we've arrested for the violence. Quite a number who what we would call sort of militia violent extremists. So we've got a number who self-identify with, the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, things like that. We also have a couple of instances where we've already identified individuals involved in the criminal behavior who we would put in the racially motivated violent extremists who advocate for what you would call sort of white supremacy. So there have been some of those individuals as well. One of the things that's happening as part of this is that as we build out the cases on the individuals, when we arrest them for the violence, we're getting a richer and richer understanding of different people's motivations. But certainly, as I said, militia violent extremism, some instances of racially motivated violent extremism, specifically advocating for the superiority of the white race.
Based on your investigation so far, do you have any evidence that the Capitol attack was organized by, quote, fake Trump protesters?
We have not seen evidence of that at this stage, certainly.
And when I look at what happened on January 6th, it appears that right-wing white supremacist groups played an instrumental role in the violent assault. Is that your conclusion also?
Well, let me answer that this way. I think we're basically saying the same thing. I mean, we don't tend to think, we at the FBI don't tend to think of violent extremism in terms of right, left. That's not a spectrum that we look at. What I would say is that it is clear, as I think I said to Chairman Durbin, that a large and growing number of the people that we have arrested so far in connection with the 6th are what we would call militia violent extremism, militia violent extremists, and then there have been some already that have emerged who I would have put in the racially motivated violent extremist bucket, again advocating for the superiority of the white race.
And I understand from your testimony previously that you did not see Antifa or left-wing groups playing a significant role in the January 6th insurrection.
Certainly, while we're equal opportunity and looking for violent extremism of any ideology, we have not to date seen any evidence of anarchist violent extremists or people subscribing to Antifa in connection with the 6th. That doesn't mean we're not looking, and we'll continue to look, but at the moment we have not seen that.
This is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Are you concerned about international terrorists paying us a visit?
Absolutely.
Okay. Are you concerned about the interaction between international terrorists and domestic terrorists?
That's a growing phenomenon, certainly something we're watching with concern.
One of my great concerns was that as people flowed into the Capitol with backpacks on, you had no idea who they were and what they were carrying. So it'd been very easy for some international terrorist group to infiltrate this crowd. Do you agree with that?
I do think it would have been easy for that to happen. I don't know that we've seen evidence that it did happen, but that's certainly one of the specific things we're looking for.
After the attack, don't you think international groups are seeing this as a vulnerability in our system?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the...
International terrorist groups may have found a way to get closer to the Capitol by integrating themselves into domestic political movements.
Well, certainly, we think the events on January 6th have been, at a minimum, an inspiration to a number of terrorist extremists out there, and may even have been worse than that.
So here's my challenge to you. Sit down and put pen to paper, and in the think big, not small. What do you need that you don't have in terms of agents and resources? And put it to paper. I'm on the Appropriations Committee with Senator Durbin. Many of us here are. I think we've got an opportunity here to plus you up. Is it fair to say that since 9/11, domestic terrorism has exploded as a threat?
Well, it's certainly grown dramatically.
Okay, grown dramatically, which takes resources to combat. Is that correct?
Yes.
Has the FBI grown dramatically since 9/11?
Not as dramatically as the threat.
Okay, so what I want you to do is take the number of agents and resources you had on 9/11 and tell us where you're at today, and make sure that we understand that the threats you're facing are much greater than there were 20 years ago, and challenge us to give you the resources to meet those threats.